People who work at super fancy hotels, what kind of stuff happens that management doesn't want people to know about? Story 1. I am not a hotel worker anymore, but I do have to meet often with clients at one of NYC's most renowned hotels frequented by the uber-rich, celebrities, sports athletes, and tech CEOs for my consulting business. All I can say is tons, and I mean tons, of S-workers frequent this place. When I first had to meet with my clients, I sat in a booth in the lobby, and one after another, scantily clad women took a seat next to me to strike up a conversation. Stupid me thought the hot mid-30s Russian woman was actually interested in me till the waiter asked me if I wanted another drink and then pressured me to also buy my newfound friend one too. That's when it struck me the woman was a worker and the hotel staff was in on the shenanigans. I've seen crazy stuff where a famous celeb, athlete, or even a politician gets into an elevator with one or more of these girls for an obvious one-night smoosh. I honestly was shocked at the time, but now nothing surprises me anymore. It's really true what goes on at these places, and it's sort of like a movie seeing it all go down right before your eyes with a public figure you sort of had respect for or didn't think twice about. It's even weirder to see them later in the press with their wife and kids in a staged photo shoot or what have you. Before we continue, do us a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I worked at a hotel in Waikiki. I was working a graveyard shift when a guest called and said a lady wearing white just walked in the door from the balcony and into the bathroom. The door to the balcony was chained shut because they were working on the exterior. No one could have walked through that door. The woman who called was terrified and wanted to get out of the room immediately. I asked my coworker who told me that, apparently there was a ghost who lived in that room. A woman who had offed herself a few years before, and occasionally she would pop up. It happened every few months. I don't know, but I can tell you that this woman was totally freaked out by whatever she saw. Story 3. I just recently quit my job at a very old hotel that's rated 4 stars and extremely popular. For an entire summer, we were given sponges and had to scrub toilets, tubs, etc. with nothing but our gloved hands and Tilex. Some housekeepers bought their own sponges, but there was no way I was going to spend money when the hotel makes millions every year. When we finally got sponges, we would use the same one for every sink, toilet, and tub/shower. There was mold growing behind the wallpaper in some of the bathrooms, especially the poolside rooms. We prioritized speed over cleanliness every time. If pillowcases didn't look used, we were taught not to replace them. It just has to look clean. It doesn't have to actually be clean. Story 4. There was a huge conference with international delegates at the hotel I previously worked at, so obviously security was beefed up. One of the guests thought the police were there to arrest him because he was delayed in his room payments as we required weekly payments for guests staying a month or more. In paranoia, he offed his son in the closet and offed himself the same way shortly after. When they eventually found the bodies, the room attendants had to undergo therapy for several months. They said the stench was unbearable. Obviously, we didn't have the room occupied for several months, and we even had a priest come in to cleanse the room. Months passed, and then one night a guest came down to reception asking to change rooms. She said the room was lovely, but she couldn't sleep because she could feel someone watching her from the corner of the room. It was the same room on the anniversary of the death of the man and his son. Story 5. I've been in the luxury hotel business for more than 30 years, and all kinds of stuff happens in this line of work. Everything. Powder deals, abortions, fights, mental health cases, theft, self-offing, you name it, it will happen. In fact, that becomes part of the training of a new person in the business. If it can happen, it will happen. Now you may think, I've been here 5 years and it has never happened, so they are wrong. Nope, it merely didn't happen on your watch. Think somebody can't steal the couches out of the lobby? Seen it. Think somebody can't push a massive vending machine over a balcony? Seen it. Think somebody would not meticulously cut every sheet and drapery into 1-inch by 1-inch squares? Seen it. Think somebody will not intentionally kick in the plumbing pipes underneath the sink to cause a flood? Seen it. Think somebody would not intentionally get a chair and then hold a lighter to a fire sprinkler head? I've seen that one many times. These things are rarities, but they can and do happen. My personal favorite was finding a roughly 8 by 8-inch hole in a hallway wall. Followed the trail of drywall dust to a nearby room where we found an unconscious person on the floor with his head covered in drywall dust. As best as we can tell, somebody decided to use his head as a battering ram, and when they realized he was out, dumped him in his room and ran away. Story 6. A friend of mine recently confirmed the cliché that the cleaning staff uses one cloth for cleaning the entire hallway. That means they start at room 1 with the furniture and stuff and end with the bathroom. Then they proceed with room 2 and start with the furniture again. On good days, they would use 2 separate rags for the room and the bathroom, but they would still start with the sink and end with the toilet, only to start with the sink in the next room again. This is so disgusting to think about, that many people forget about it very fast after hearing this. Kind of a self-protection measurement of our brains, I guess. If I have to stay in a hotel, I always pack a bunch of disinfectants and will refuse to let the staff clean my room. Story 7. I used to work at a restaurant in a 5-star resort that catered to rich and famous people. We'd regularly have musicians, professional athletes, actors, etc. as guests. So obviously, we were supposed to have a high degree of professionalism. Anyway, people were gross. One of our servers was training a new hire on opening our restaurant. While showing the new hire how to set up to open our restaurant, I caught her telling the newbie to get the cleanest bucket you can find for the sanitary solution to wipe down tables. That pissed me off. I told the hire to not listen to her and to find one that's actually clean, and if you can't, make one clean before you use it. One of the head chefs had a hemorrhoid issue or something and would pick at his rear frequently. Once, I was in the employee locker room at the urinal doing what one does at the urinal when I heard the toilet in the stall next to me flush. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the stall door open and a guy wearing cook whites walks right by the sinks and out of the locker room without washing his hands. I would have reported it, but I had no idea who it was, and we had dozens of cooks. Story 8. I worked cooking at an ultra-exclusive resort in Utah. Nothing that exciting happened in my year there. I found a bottle in the tallboy, the large fridge, labeled Kristen Bell's Milk. Do not use? Most celebrities were nice, except for David Beckham. He specifically requested that no staff members make eye contact with him. Basically, Beckham, when he stays in the US, asks for a no-contact style from the hotels because American hotel staff are painfully excited, and he felt bothered by the always-on nature of the service there. I had put in my 2 weeks and was really drunk on a day off, and made a post on Facebook about how Gordon Ramsay was coming, and I hoped he wasn't filming Kitchen Nightmares with us. I was fired within 24 hours. I did get to cook fish tacos for him and his family, though, and I heard he complimented the dinner kitchen crew directly, which is cool. Story 9. The hotel turns a blind eye to dealers and S-workers more often than you'd think. They hardly complain and usually prepay huge bonds happily. Also, the staff don't give a crap if you're having an affair. When I worked at a nice hotel, the affair thing was brought up in training. Never mention a person being regular, and doubly don't mention anything about their partner or the fact that it's a different partner. That became a rule after a valet basically kick-started a very nasty divorce with a wealthy guest. When a friend was living at the plaza in the early 2000s, he basically said that for anything you wanted, you just called the concierge. I know owners at high-end NYC hotels that keep a trusted dealer around because having them arrested or removed opens it up to rivals and gangs, which bring in drama and violence. For years, I was employed at a high-end hotel in NYC, and this was undoubtedly the reality. The one year the new creative director decided to ban the friendly drug guy, it was terrible for the hotel. Several police raids were conducted because the vacuum was filled by sloppy operators. When we welcomed the old guy back, stuff calmed down. He was actually pretty cool and was aware enough not to do his business directly on hotel property. Story 10. I am a CCTV operative at a casino. We have cameras everywhere, and just because you don't see a camera doesn't mean we don't see you. Most cameras, if not all, in a casino are strong enough to zoom from one side of the entire casino lobby to the other and then focus. I've done this and can literally count the lashes on a man's face if I choose to. We see everything. We log everything. The craziest thing I've seen till date was when this girl goes into the casino with her husband and his friend, blows his friend's flute in the elevator, and 5 seconds later gets out and kisses her husband. Also, we can get word anywhere in the casino faster than you can move, partially to say F you to cheaters, mainly because y'all made a mess in the elevator. We also have FBI or CIA facial recognition, sometimes both. Just wearing a wig or changing makeup, or wearing a hoodie and a ball cap with a COVID mask will not save you. Story 11. A decade ago, I stayed in a hotel for a week. They gave me a good room. It was quite cheap compared to other rooms. I should have known something was fishy. On the first night, while I was half asleep, I felt like someone was cuddling me. In the morning, I thought it was my imagination and brushed it off. The same thing happened the second night. I even woke up in the middle of the night because I felt the pressure of someone hugging me tightly. I asked to change the room the next day. What was strange was that the hotel staff didn't even ask why I wanted to change the room and just gave me another room and charged me more. I am pretty sure they knew something was wrong in that room. Story 12. Lots of S-workers come to the bars during conventions and large events. They're very easy to pick out, and you can always tell whose mark it is. Guys get their watches, phones, money, etc. stolen. Cops get called, and girls get arrested. Oftentimes on the property still. Your cooks and bartenders all went out last night and drank until 2:30 a.m. and did powder, then came back in to open at 9:30 a.m. The bartenders make an obscene amount of money, like $150,000 to $200,000 depending on the year. People pass away in rooms, and EMS is called more often than you think. A lot of the food in the non-fine dining restaurants is frozen, like the wings, shrimp, etc. So, when you pay $28 for 10 wings, know they came out of the walk-in freezer and dropped into the oil. A lot of the dressings are Ken's brand. Banquet food and fine dining are always fresh and house-made though. Lots of top-end hotels have an executive chef who is a great cook. You'll eat well at banquets and in the fine dining restaurants. Story 13. If you're the type that is saving up for a special occasion or a romantic getaway, don't go to luxury hotels. Find a quaint bed and bath that's half the price, or stay in a normal hotel and visit local spas, relaxation centers. Luxury hotels are not meant for you. I know it sounds elitist, but here's why they aren't meant for you. We don't want to rip off Ernest Telsch real people. Luxury hotels are absolute rip-offs. Sure, there's an element of our suppliers raising prices because they know we can pay it, and so those prices get passed down, but the price hikes aren't nearly that much more than a normal hotel. Our purpose is to take as much money as possible from rich and wealthy people who are out of touch with reality and how much things cost. We do a really good job of making everything seem special and fancy, but that's because it's our job. We get really good at it. Of course, location and top-of-the-line chefs are irreplaceable, but you can almost always visit the restaurant/property without wasting your money by staying there. Trickle-down economics is BS, but it's what we have, and luxury hotels are one of the bastions that facilitate this as much as possible. Get the most out of your getaway by avoiding these overpriced pigs with copious amounts of lipstick. Leave them for the entitled, idiot, wealthy people that wouldn't know true quality if it smacked them in the head with a silver-plated spoon. I don't think that there's anything wrong with going on a honeymoon and staying in an overwater bungalow in Bora Bora. A small B&B isn't going to have that experience. The rooms are crazy expensive, but you are paying that for an experience that you can't just pop around the corner for. Or in Southeast Asia, the service at the luxury resorts is just next level. I stayed at one last year where our room included a private concierge who was available all the time to book us whatever we wanted to do, make reservations, and get us a car to drop us off, and when we were done sightseeing or eating, we'd text her and another car would pick us up. We could have done all that ourselves, but having her help meant we didn't have to think about anything or even pay, since it was all added to the room bill. It made our stay so incredibly relaxing, and before you say they gouged us on price for all those things she handled, after 10 days of eating, drinking, whatever we wanted at the hotel, massages, a snorkeling trip, hiring a driver for a day to see the stay, and rides to and from the resort to restaurants, shopping pretty much every day, the total incidental bill was $1,100. Story 14. The maids are paid by rooms, not hours, and need to do very unsanitary things to get the room up to the standards. We needed to make sure that the kettles were clean, but we didn't have a cleaning agent to use for it, and our hands didn't fit in it to try and scrub it with a sponge. So we were told by our supervisors to use the toilet brushes to clean it. Yes, the same toilet brush we used for the toilets. Story 15. I used to work in accounts receivable for a couple of luxury hotels that were owned by the same LLC. We would open blocks of rooms for the generic sports season about 8 months in advance. Due to high demand, these reservations had to be a 2-day Friday-Saturday stay. Payment was made in full. Refunds were available only if you canceled a month before the arrival date. When I first started in the position, I discovered $63,000 worth of reservations that had been canceled on time but were never refunded. I showed it to my manager, an absolutely incompetent woman who couldn't check in a guest if she needed to. She got back to me after discussing it with one of the owners. I can't remember exactly how she put it, but I was told to just forget the matter and not to mention it to anyone. I got a $500 cash Christmas bonus that year. Story 16. A well-known luxury hotel and resort chain keeps a database of you. They get pictures from the internet and basically stalk you to create a profile. They put what you ordered to eat, how many towels you needed, what drinks you liked, your kids' names and birthdays, your address and phone number. Everyone working in the hotel has access to this database and can see your information. It's not all good stuff either. We know you were a jerk to Jen while you were staying in London. The one I was at had to remove cameras in the lobby because bigwig guys would bring their mistresses, and no evidence was allowed to be recorded. Michael Crichton, the author, said he spent a few weeks in a high-end hotel in London. He was writing a book at the time and taped notes to a dresser to keep track of the timeline and subplots in his novel. When he returned to the hotel a few years later, he found the staff had put bits of tape on the dresser, just as he had done years before during his last visit. Story 17. The extent to which the higher-ups turn a blind eye to the complaints of their own staff, who are underpaid, overworked, and expected either to babysit or mollify their clients under circumstances that far exceed their pay grade or expertise. When I was 18, I had a summer job at a high-end hotel in the absolutely corrupt, feudalistic non-society that is the island of Jersey, off the French coast but a British protectorate. In the 4 months I worked there, I was touched up by much older men on numerous occasions, and the owner told me that if I complained about it, he'd sack me and then see me removed from the island. Like the idiot I was scared of him, so I just let it happen without complaint. In the end, my then-girlfriend came over from Paris to basically hand-hold me out of there. It was completely non-controversial by the standards of the place and the time. Every other woman I knew there had the same sort of story. I maintain that serious hoteliers, and I don't mean your average corporate Holiday Inn stooge or family-run B and B are gangsters at least half of the time. Story 18. My brother worked in an upscale hotel in Southern California. A morbidly obese guest sat on the toilet in his room, shattered it, got his femoral arteries slashed by a chunk of broken toilet, passed away by bleeding excessively, and flooded his room when the water line ruptured. My brother found out about it from the maintenance guy who found the body. Management made sure no other guest ever knew, including the guests in the room below the scene who called for maintenance because water was running down their wall. Story 19. We had one of the Baldwins beat up a dancer behind the building once. That was before I worked there, but people still talked about it. We had an entire wing of the hotel infested with bedbugs. They just moved through the walls from one room to the next. We waged a war of attrition that took years and cost a lot of money, but we never stopped renting the rooms. Sometimes addicts have money, or maybe better said, sometimes people with a lot of money have addictions, so maybe once a year or so you'd have someone move in and then end up staying for months, and you didn't know it was a problem until it was a problem. One day, there are suddenly a lot of police cars in the parking lot, and it's something we're just not supposed to talk about and pretend never happened. We had one old guy who was rich and divorced several times over. He just retired in the hotel. He had a room on the ground level right around the corner from the hotel bar. I don't know what he paid for it, but it wasn't cheap, and he furnished his own room. Everyone on staff knew his habits, knew his drink, and knew when to leave him alone or when he wanted to chat. The funniest thing was, after he passed, he'd pre-booked his memorial at a totally different hotel. He liked his privacy, I guess. I once did the taxes for a ridiculously wealthy couple in Florida. Before they moved to a retirement community, they lived in a resort. I asked my boss to clarify. They lived like spent a bunch of time there, right? Nope, they lived. They paid, I think, $1.5 million total for the room and furnished it themselves. Clearwater, Florida, a very nice place for a room. They lived there for about 5 years and moved to a retirement community when the husband fell and broke his hip. When my grandparents retired, they sold their home and moved into the Maxim Hotel/Casino in Las Vegas. They ran the numbers and found it was cheaper than a retirement community and had better amenities. Story 20. My buddy was a dive instructor at a luxury resort on an island. One of the guests had a heart attack on the diving excursion before he got off the boat. The nearest doctor couldn't come for 24 hours, so they put the body in a guest room and cranked up the air conditioner. The doctor was to sign off on the expiry and do formalities, not to save life. Of course, reception gave the key to the room to a newly arrived honeymooning couple. They were greeted by the star of Weekend at Bernie's. Story 21. We, the hotel staff, take notes on your reservation profile. Everything from anniversary information to favorite cocktails and foods. We add notes to pass along to other staff. My wife and I got married in 2009 and stayed a couple of nights in a hotel during our honeymoon. Cut to 10 years later, we decided to redo our honeymoon for our 10th anniversary, so we stayed in all the same hotels. When we got to our room, we had flowers and a bottle of champagne with a note about how thrilled they were that we were spending our 10th anniversary there after honeymooning there as newlyweds. Turns out, when we booked for our honeymoon, we told them, and they were able to figure out 10 years later we were there for our anniversary. If we redo this trip a third time, I will 100% make it a point to stay there again. Story 22. Human trafficking became so bad that the company gave us training on looking out for it. There is a policy in place to knowingly cause you issues and pacify you like a routine elevator maintenance during a busy period because the tech travels around and it is now or in 3 weeks from now. The elevator did not have unforeseen issues. Professionals are the worst guests for partying and puking everywhere and peeing in halls and breaking things and banging in public areas. Lawyers, doctors, and teachers. In that order, whenever they had conventions, extra staff were there the next day to deal with the damage. Also, we assumed not everyone would show on 100% occupancy night and booked more than we could hold. The rare time we did have everyone show, here is free stuff and a ride to X hotel. We even had friendly agreements with neighboring competition to let each other know when we could take each other's overbookings. I used to work at a high-end lodge that hosted holiday parties, fancy dinners for software giants, and one exec peed all over a room, $13,000 in damage. We regularly had rich guys pull up in their Lamborghinis with a dancer. My favorite was the couple we had to essentially evict from their room due to smell and noise complaints. When we got in, there were dozens of designer shoeboxes and powder residue everywhere. The woman left with her foot hanging out the window as they drove away. Rich people are weird. My wife and I flew through Atlanta with our teen daughter. The TSA agent asked her who she was and who we were. The spouse started to speak for her, but the agent just waited and watched. My daughter sort of giggled and said, "That's my dad, mom, and sibling." My spouse was confused, but I am absolutely sure that the agent was checking for trafficking, and I appreciate knowing there are people out there willing to be trained and trying to do something about it. Story 23. I only work as a housekeeper at a regular 4-star hotel, but probably about 25% of people either bleed or leave poop stains on the beds. It's truly atrocious how disgusting people are, especially when they know someone else is cleaning it up. Even the wealthier guests and the best tippers are the cleanest people. If someone fully craps on the bed and uses towels to wipe, leaves their juices on the shower door, drinks heavily and pukes on the carpet in multiple places, and clogs the toilet, that person will not tip at all. But the person who barely used the full bed and didn't use the shower at all and was super clean and polite, now that's a good tipper. Up until a school trip when I was probably 17, I didn't even know to tip the housekeeping staff. My family never did it, and we'd been to plenty of hotels. For this school trip, the teacher in charge reminded us on the bus about 10 minutes before we arrived at the hotel to please leave a tip for the housekeepers, and if we wanted to be sure it got to the folks actually cleaning the room, to leave it under the pillow with a nice note. Story 24. I was once waiting for an elevator in a hotel, pretty early in the morning. The doors opened and reflexively I started to get on. But it was filled with EMTs, a stretcher, and the hotel's general manager. He politely suggested I wait for the next one. The patient had an oxygen mask on, with some tubes leading somewhere. Later, I noticed that the ambulance pulled off without the siren and waited for a stoplight. I suspect he was not alive all along, and they just made it look like he was unconscious and getting treatment. I used to work as an EMT as well as in a hotel, and I've seen both worlds, but no lights and sirens doesn't necessarily mean the patient has expired. It could mean the emergency is over, meaning adequate care is being provided by qualified medical help, and going code 3 to the hospital doesn't bring any greater reward than just going code 1. Story 25. Good management constantly fixes mess-ups, and guests never know. In my experience as a manager, if maintenance shows up with the manager to check something in the AC or TV, then an employee accidentally checked in the wrong reservation. The manager gets your name, gets you a free drink at the bar, and fixes the mess-up. Using the elements. The room's AC and heating go out all the time. If it's a hot summer and the AC doesn't work, but we are overbooked, the last check-in will get the room. We bank on it being cooler in the night. We know everything about you, especially if we have a reason to. I know that brand new Corvette is rented. I know your schedule, and I know all your movements through the hotel. If you are good at hotels, then you have a good idea of who, what, when, and where most of the time. All hands on deck. Ever noticed a random maintenance guy on one floor and security on the next floor, and then a manager checking out a picture on the other floor? I've spread the team out on each floor to deter kids with sports teams. The parents like to get drunk and let their little darlings run free in the hotel. Low-grade corn movies are filmed in hotels all the time. Yes, the half-drunk girl you walked in with your 5 buddies who just want to see the pool is obvious corn. We know and have cameras, and then everyone gets Pikachu-faced when you're asked to leave. I saw you rapping at 3 a.m., walking down Main Street with your buddy, filming using an iPhone. You're good, but we know you aren't a guest, so just walking into the hotel isn't going to work. We know it's a nice place, but ask for permission. Same with influencers. Beer is our bartering system. I could fill pools with the amount of beer I've given away. Got a maintenance issue? Go to the bar and have a drink on me. Room not ready, and you're mad, have a beer, etc. Events pay the bills, not guests. We could sell every room every night and still not hold a candle to event revenue. $40,000 weddings, $85,000 hospital parties, $65,000, Shriners events, etc. When guests say we will close because their room money is what helps keep the lights on, we have a chuckle behind their backs. Larger hotels have better insurance to compensate for bedbugs. We won't say their name, but we will hand you over to human resources who will file a claim and start a compensation package. As for when it happens, it can cost us between $2,500 and $5,000 to clear a room of them, and we treat the rooms on each side of the infected. Also, all hotels get them, but if a wealthy person gets them, they will spend tons of money to fix the issue, whereas small, cheap hotels get people who just can't afford the treatment. The hotel has a nervous system. The fire panel is wired that runs through the whole hotel, telling us of any water, fire, or tampering with the hotel's safety. How do I know you are smoking in your room? I didn't walk by, the fire panel told me. How did I know you tried to remove the detector and the fire panel, and why are you using steam to cover up smoke? The correct way would be a thick plastic closed hair cover, but no promises. But the panel knows much, and those housekeepers are also looking for evidence of smoke window seal smokers. We don't care about high-end powder. I have had an elitist drop a small bag of it, and I returned it to him in the bathroom. It's not worth our time to confront them or get police involved unless it's a full-on party that's out of control. Story 26. I work in a Vegas casino, and I've seen on multiple occasions luggage down at the trash dock. I mean luggage with airport tags still attached that looks like it's in use. I could draw a couple of conclusions. Are people buying new luggage here? Not likely. We sell it, but these are newer bags I am seeing. The much more likely scenario is that these people are either no longer here or no longer alive. People pass away here and you'll never hear about them. Trafficking is the darkest thought for me. Plenty of beautiful young women here are being way too loose with their own safety. No one is blaming the women, but getting blackout drunk and wandering off into the city or down Flamingo Road at 2 a.m. is disregarding your own safety. I worked at a luxury residential building. One thing I learned is that for a lot of rich people, luggage is a disposable, use-once item. Since it was residential, I'd know if they moved out or passed away. That wasn't the case. They just threw out next to new luggage. Among all sorts of other stuff you wouldn't believe, I made as much selling their trash as I was paid to work there. But luggage was weirdly frequent. Story 27. I worked in room service at a very chic hotel in Miami. One guest requested that a specific waitress always deliver him food. Not exactly sure what went on in there, but he tipped her with a big bag of grass each time, which she would promptly bring back to share with the room service staff. Calvin Klein brought his own food because he was on a special diet. He was a jerk about it too. I can confirm that the concierge will get you whatever you want: women, powder, Cuban cigars, and guest lists at clubs. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I worked at a nice but older resort, one step above a cheap motel. A local dancer stole all the furniture from one of our rooms. It was old, crappy wicker furniture. We had a local couple who were staying with us to avoid being served for a lawsuit. We weren't allowed to say that they were staying there. The police eventually showed up for them. There were several times when guests would come to the front desk claiming the maids had stolen something from their room. They would be irate, demanding we call the police every single time. They found the item either in their luggage or car, or their travel companions had packed the item. One gentleman claimed that he forgot his very expensive camera in his room. My manager pulled up a video that showed him packing up his car, placing the camera on top of the car, and driving off without realizing it. Story 28. I worked in special events for 10 years in Vegas, and Vegas security is the easiest thing to bypass. Wear a black shirt and say, "I am here for the gig in the ballroom. Which way do I go?" It was surprising that a mass shooting hadn't happened sooner, and it has not gotten better since the shooting. That was the thing that always confused me about the Mandalay Bay shooting. People were saying, how didn't they know or see him bringing in bags and bags of guns? And it's just like, dude, there are so many people going in and out of those places every hour, and the security is likely more focused on looking at gamblers trying to cheat versus a guy coming in with a larger than normal amount of bags. I think this is a pretty universal thing. Another example is putting on a high-visibility vest and then just walking in store back rooms, hotel or bar storage rooms, wherever. If you want to be 100% invisible, wear a cleaning company uniform. Even the customer staff will just avoid you, most being smug about there being at least someone they can walk by without that fake greeting. If I were to break bad, I'd totally rob places in a cleaner uniform. Story 29. I used to work as a freelance bartender, and hotels were always the worst-run situations I would end up in. The beer lines had never been cleaned. Like literally never. I asked where the equipment was to do it, and no one could tell me. I eventually found it dusty in a closet in the cellar. The breakfast buffet leftovers were usually reheated and given to the staff, but sometimes became the following days. Breakfast buffet. The chefs were just drunk pretty much every day. The worst I saw, though, was the wine put out on tables at a wedding. They married them up, recapped them, and put them back in the cellar. Not even the same wine is getting poured into bottles. Guests had drunk straight from them, and everyone had seen, and no one had an issue with this. In my country, this is actually illegal. It's called diverting waste. This was the final straw for me in this particular venue. I told the manager that I didn't give a crap what he did after my time there ended, but there was no way I was letting that wine be resold. He tried to tell me that it was perfectly legal. I cut him off and told him that it wasn't. It doesn't matter either way. It's disgusting and immoral, and if I find a single bottle of that wine in the stores, I am walking out. Luckily, when you're freelance bartending somewhere, you're there because they desperately need you, so threatening to leave works really well. Story 30. I worked in a 5-star resort in college. The amount of powder the staff consumed wasn't nearly as much as the guests. People left blows as tips. They left grass. They left a lot of stuff that is not supposed to be reusable. Also, a lot of essays happened in the spa. It was rich white trash a-holes thinking they could get handsy. I also saw a server spit in a very famous person's food. I had no idea who they were at the time, but even the manager was okay with it. I was personally mortified. Even if the dude was a racist, misogynistic a-hole, it was hard to process that behavior as being acceptable at a place that was about perfection. I think about that often. If it can happen to that dude, lots and lots of MAGA people have had spit put in their food by waitstaff. Even at the high-end resorts. Wearing those red hats is an advertisement to point out who the biggest a-holes are in the group. Story 31. The bellman or night valets will happily set you up with a dancer, and the hotel bartenders and servers routinely work more than 10 hours without a break. If your behavior on the property requires calling the police, you will just be escorted back to your room if you are there with your family. If you're alone, you're at a minimum being kicked out of the hotel and probably arrested. Hotel management is aggressively incompetent. If you're terrible at everything and want a mediocre salary with long hours and no responsibility, but you can wear a blazer, this is the job for you. The big hotel chains will nickel and dime you to death, and not always legally. Some of them have been sued for it, lost, and continue to do it anyway. Everyone on staff hates the majority of the guests. That labor and wage violations are rampant. Story 32. I used to work as a bellhop, primarily in room service at the fanciest hotel in Copenhagen. At the time, all rooms had a comped basket of fruits, chocolate, and a bottle of reasonable champagne waiting. The guests almost never opened the champagne, and since it was unaccounted for, I had the most outrageously well-stocked wall of champagne of anyone I knew as a young man. I went to see The Matrix when it came out. My buddy and I both enjoyed a bottle each with that. Story 33. Even fancy places have to deal with bedbugs. I remember we had a unit that was infested, so we closed off the entire wing on that floor and stripped the room and all adjacent rooms down to bare concrete and framing and threw away all of the furniture, carpets, drapes, etc. We blasted ozone machines in those rooms for a couple of days after stripping them out, too. Our company did not screw around with that. From what I understand, there was an incident back in the 80s where they only took half measures and had to shut down a 40-room building for almost an entire summer. Story 34. I worked as a valet at a very nice hotel. I had to give some very drunk people their car. I am talking about having trouble standing. Management said it's their property and we have to give them their vehicle. Lots of corn videos were shot on the premises. Guys unload a ton of camera gear and get the waterfront penthouse. A couple of done-up girls come and leave, then everyone checks out. No one stays the night even though the room is paid for, and I always found that strange, but I guess I get it. Celebrities always had aliases, but we knew they were coming. The staff at the high-end restaurants on the property were drunks and loved powder, but I think that's just a lot of that industry. I don't know. I thought nicer restaurants might pay better and have passionate people, but they just party all day and charge a ton for food and drinks. Story 35. I worked as a housekeeper for luxury hotels and rental properties. They were really strict on how much time we had to spend cleaning each room, so you had to move really fast. I am a perfectionist with OCD, so I tried to make every place I cleaned spotless so guests could enjoy their stay. I got written up for taking too much time. They would always say, it doesn't have to be clean, it just has to look clean. So, always bring your own pillowcase. Walk around in indoor shoes/flip-flops. The top sheet is your bed rubber because duvets rarely get washed ever. Story 36. Everyone who has an event in a hotel is a VIP. The next client incoming, some event planner p-hole lady, does not give a crap if the hotel crews have been working 15-hour days for the past week. If their rooms are not 100% perfect or their event office isn't ready at the specific time requested, then they throw a big, huge fit and hurt hardworking employees with terrible medallia surveys, J.D. Power, or whoever. That one bad survey, in turn, turns into an internal witch hunt to find the problem. And it was probably some low-level manager who forgot to order the right vodka, or more than likely told several people that he could not get said vodka because of a supply chain issue. But that doesn't matter. The client is mad. There was a bad survey. The executives lost their bonus for the quarter, and they fired a 10-year employee over vodka and a bad survey. Look, if you go to a fancy hotel, be a good person and let some of the things that go wrong go. Everyone is human. Stuff happens. Screw your sales team trying to team build with marshmallows and toothpick towers. Hotel event meetings are a huge waste. It's a huge electricity drain, water drain, and food waste, and it can never be perfect. The anything under 9 out of 10 means failure survey system is a complete fraud, and I am honestly surprised there hasn't been one of those deep dive long-form journalism articles about it yet, because the average person filling out a survey does not perceive 8 out of 10 as a bad score, and I guarantee if they had a concept of the meetings and performance reviews that kind of thing triggered, they'd be filling them out differently. Story 37. I used to work as an evening clerk at a resort hotel. We would strategize which rooms people would stay in. Families with small children would all be put on the same side and preferably on the same floors. Single guys would never be put near them. And if you're super nice to us while checking you in, we will put you in a better room. We know exactly which rooms have better views, newer beds, and are even slightly bigger due to the layout. We also know which rooms have the worst views, are the noisiest, and have the oldest beds, and yes, if you're rude to the staff at check-in, there's a good chance you'll end up in the crappy rooms. Story 38. I worked in a hotel/hostel in Hollywood, California. It wasn't fancy at all, but a lot of people stayed there because it was cheap and pretty close to touristy stuff. We had a long list of banned people, including a ton of S-workers who caused problems and robbed people, violent hustlers and dealers who were violent or sold bad powder that made people pass away, and some relatives of celebrities who were just insane. A lot of people passed away in that hotel, and we barely cleaned up after them before renting the room out again. Sometimes, the same day, the body was taken away. In the entire time I worked there, we never got new mattresses or were treated for bugs, even though we knew multiple rooms had bed bugs. Story 39. I have worked for all ranges, high-end, with a lot of self-offing and robberies, far more than low-end places. A lot of guests pooped everywhere and anywhere but the toilet. We had a guest throw a chair through our front window, and the management made up some weird story about high winds. We have a rat problem, old building issues, tech glitches, and a lot of homeless people, and sometimes even junkies who sneak into our car park lobby areas. An ex-employee once stole a guest's BMW, which was super easy considering how lax our parking system is and the fact that you have to leave your keys with us front desk workers. You meet many more S-workers/dealers, but they are usually high-end ones. We are talking about $500 a night workers and dealers. Most of the time, they are generally pretty likable and cause way less trouble. I heard that a guy once hit his friend because they were doing it with multiple workers, and the one he particularly liked his friend was flirting with. I've met many celebrities, but they're mostly pretty tame. Chris Brown was weirdly nice. Management was also furious that one of our employees tipped people off about a celeb staying there and the name they were using. Multiple employees wrote love letters to celebs, which resulted in many people being fired. I've had multiple guests offer me powder or give me it as a tip. Low-end places, though, are where the crazy is really at. I've never had more insane shifts in people than when I worked at budget motels or hostels. Story 40. I manage properties all over the LA area, including Beverly Hills. S-working is a common occurrence. No one really gives a crap unless there is drama. Once, we had a guest who demanded a refund because the worker stole his money and proceeded to ask us to file a police report. We informed him that it wasn't a good idea. It varies, but cleaning and turning over a room after a guest stay can cost a hotel as little as $15 to $30, normally varying on room size, regardless of how expensive/high-end it is. The revenue made is astounding, even after factoring in operating labor costs. A ton of money goes back to investors' management bonuses. I regularly made a six-figure salary without a college degree, making a little under or just a tad over $100,000 a year pre-bonus. Bonus fluctuates based on your salary contract, but I quite often had a bonus plan of 25% of my base salary every quarter. Employee theft is rampant if not managed correctly. I came into a hotel that had a night auditor who was pocketing guest credit cards. I had some weird calls from guests asking about lost cards, only to find they all checked in under the same guy. We caught him on security cameras pocketing cards as he distracted guests during the check-in process. I called him in for a fake meeting for a police bust, and when he got into the hotel at the front desk, he saw the cops roll in from the front windows and tried to run. He got caught, of course. As it turns out, his wallet was filled with stolen credit cards, and the vehicle he drove to the meeting was a rental that he paid for using one of our guests' missing cards. Story 41. Well, I don't work at service anymore, but when I did, I got laid a lot with the corporate women who would be staying over or were there for Christmas parties or that sort of thing. Without fail, any time I was working the after-hours bar, I was getting some women sitting at the bar and chatting me up. I spent the night with more 40-year-old women when I was 20 than I've had since becoming 40. Just an absolute shagfest when I was working. Story 42. I am associated with a popular convention that everyone would recognize. The convention attendees get so out of control that the hotel will only host the convention if they have a private security force. Since the private security aren't law enforcement or licensed, they do pretty much whatever it takes to keep trouble out of the public eye. Mostly, it's locking people up in rooms or escorting them out of town, but they can get rough at times. But none of the convention attendees know they are there, and the hotel staff pretends they don't see them. Even those who run afoul of them don't know exactly who it was that grabbed them. Story 43. I worked in fancy hotels for over a decade, some corporate-owned, some privately owned, and some Indian-owned. Just about anything you can imagine happens. I was in a group of managers of different properties who would meet weekly for drinks, and we would share, well, you wouldn't believe this crap, stories. We had a saying, don't ever say I have seen it all or what's the worst that can happen. But to be specific, fires, expiries, robbery, S-working, banging in every nook and cranny, drunk people doing stupid crap, and important people doing stupid crap and thinking their clout can make it go away. However, the best ones are really the most unnatural and just mechanical failures. Things like fire systems going off, a boiler busting and water raining down an elevator all the way to the lobby. Scissor lifts are falling through the floor because the dirt washed out under the foundation concrete. Probably the scariest thing is really just the turnover rate. The owner's corporate overlords are always trying to save a buck anywhere they can, and it's a shark-filled world. I have seen so many times where they would fire the managers of departments who were loyal and hardworking just to save $2,000 a year by promoting someone who barely knew what to do. We ask the employees to deal with the unexpected all the time and never reward them, and it's just a game of how long will they put up with this crap versus do they believe they can do better versus will someone do it for less pay without them realizing it. Story 44. Stay on the main part of the club. Don't stay at the Strat. Avoid that entire area, to be honest. It's in a crappy part of Vegas. If budget is a concern, Luxor and Excalibur are both super cheap and have good locations. S-working is illegal in Clark County. You will get handed 1 million cards for dance services if you walk the club at night. The corn stars they show on these cards are not the ones going to show up. There will be dancers in the casinos trying to find a mark. They might rob you if you take them to your room. Las Vegas PD also does stings. If you want a dancer, go to Pahrump and get a legal one because you do not want to spend your vacation at the Clark County Jail. Also, book directly through your hotel and not something like Orbit's Hotwire. If you have any issues, it's so much easier if you book through the hotel. Sometimes they can't fix an issue if you booked a third party. Table service can be fun, but be ready to pay $800 for a $40 bottle of liquor if you do. Don't be the guy who spends $2,000 renting a Ferrari. They are a dime a dozen in Vegas, and no one but you will care. Story 45. A manager in LA was dealing and was banging a few of his side hustle clients, one of whom happened to be his regional manager's wife. It's how it all came to light, as the husband got suspicious as to why the wife kept going to one hotel when he was good friends with another hotel manager across town who could get her in at super low rates. It was how he rose so fast, actually. He gave special rates to his clients if they stayed at his hotel. He went from assistant manager to manager within a year due to how much traffic/high-end clients he was bringing in. The clients acted like the manager was the man and were really chummy to the manager and the manager in kind. But it was just a way to fast-track his rise to manager. It worked out in the end for the hotel, as a bunch of the manager's clients paid extra to keep it a secret, as a number of them were in positions of power in companies or government. Story 46. I managed a restaurant in a hotel for about 6 months last year. The restaurant was privately owned, but we had daily contact with hotel managers and other staff. One day, one of the managers came to me and said, "So, we have a weird and sensitive issue I need you to address with your staff. Every day in the men's bathroom, we find boogers wiped in the third stall." Every day, it eventually stopped, but the booger bandit was on the loose for a month or so. There was also a ton of weird crap happening in the lobby bar. Sometimes the lobby smelled bad, like sewage, and one of the bartenders showed us that right behind the bar, there was basically an uncovered manhole that would randomly back up. The hotel had recently done a huge renovation, spending millions of dollars on a remodel. But it was apparently just a facelift, and everything else was still old. The air conditioning ducts in our restaurant dripped all over the place. Nothing super crazy in my experience, but I didn't really work for the hotel, so I am sure there is a lot more behind the scenes. Story 47. I live in Las Vegas, and I've worked in a few hotels, and even the finest hotels get bedbugs, no matter how well they keep the rooms clean. When you have guests from all over the world staying at your hotel, and they just got off a crowded plane with lots of other people from all over the world, you're going to occasionally get bedbugs. But most places do take it seriously and are very proactive. That being said, a couple of decades ago, my wife was a housekeeping supervisor at one of the downtown hotels/casinos, and one specific room had a recurring bedbug problem. No matter what the hotel did, including calling in several different companies, they could not get rid of them in that one room. The housekeepers would hate to be assigned that floor because of that room, and they admit they would get in and out as fast as they could. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.